Hello everyone, I'm Joichin Nile, author of Race, My Story, and Humanity's Bottom Line. I've been asked to answer a few questions about my book, and I'm happy to do so. First, please summarize the central point of Race, My Story, and Humanity's Bottom Line, and its relationship to the emotional emancipation and psychological liberation of Black people. Well, the central point of the book is that we are all one family. All 7+ billion of us on planet Earth are really, literally one human family. There is an emotional and psychological and spiritual and physical bond between us and among us that most of us are really unaware of, but that exists nonetheless. So the focal point of the book is our human unity. Now, how does that relate to the emotional emancipation and psychological liberation of Black people? Well, chapter 4 of the book is entitled The Effects of Racism, the psychological effects of racism, how it impacts people of color. And in that book, in that chapter of the book, I talk about the 4 linchpins that I believe comprise the whole issue, the whole myth, the whole lie of African inferiority. And that is physical unattractiveness, intellectual inferiority, historical irrelevance, and social deviance. And I give quite a bit of detail in all 4 of those areas, really explaining and exposing as a myth that, people of African descent are any of those things. And so I hope that in reading that chapter, Black people will really understand that not only are we equal to everyone else in the human species, but that we have much of which to be proud. What inspired you to write Race, My Story, and Humanity's Bottom Line? Well, 3 things really. My childhood experiences growing up in segregation under Jim Crow laws in New Orleans in the 50s and 60s. My adult experiences of living with the daily indignities of racism, as they are commonly referred to, and specifically shopping while Black, which still happens to me. I still get followed around department stores when I'm shopping. And also being the recipient of, or the target of the subtle racism of low expectations. That happens to me more often than I think many people would realize. So those 2 things, my childhood as well as my adult experiences with racism, combined with my deep understanding, my true and deep belief that we are all one, and that therefore treating people the way I'm treated and the way other people of color are treated in the United States based upon our race is just ridiculous and unfair and morally bankrupt. So those are the 3 things, my childhood experiences, my adult experiences with racism, combined with my understanding that it is so wrong and so unfair. That's what really inspired me to write this book. How did you come up with the title? Well, it did take a while. It took months, really, because I wanted the title to reflect what the book was about. And so there I was one Sunday morning, literally sitting up in bed, writing, when in a flash of intuition it occurred to me, wow, I'm writing my story of my experiences with racism as an African American, and I'm also giving humanity's bottom line, what I believe is humanity's racial bottom line. And by golly, as they say, there's the title of the book, Race, My Story, and Humanity's Bottom Line. It fits perfectly because it really gets to the essence of the book. So I am so happy that I had that flash of intuition. I think it fits. I think it really captures the book. Name one entity that you feel supported you outside of family members. Well, hands down, it's my dear, dear friends, Jack and Teresa. Teresa Sales and Jack Straighten. They were my allies in writing this book. I mean, they read every word of the book and then went through it and outlined it. They underscored it with red ink. They highlighted it. They put many flags, probably over 150 flags in the book, showing me places that they thought perhaps I needed to flush out a little bit more, or perhaps even where there were spelling or grammatical errors. So they really were of tremendous help in being I'll call them my editors-in-chief. I don't know how many hours they put into it, but obviously it was a tremendous outpouring of time and effort. So I really do thank Jack and Teresa for their outstanding help. They were my prime supporters in this book. If you had to do it all over again, would you change anything in the book? I actually would. I would flush out the last chapter, Humanity's Bottom Line. I put quite a bit more detail in that part of the book. That, of course, is the end of the book, and I was so concerned about it, the length of the book at that point. I was so concerned about it being long that I really, was trying to be as succinct as I could when I got to that part of the book. And in doing so, I think I might have been a little too sparse. And so if I had it to do over again, or if I indeed do a second edition of the book, I would put a little bit more detail, if you will, into the Humanities Bottom Line section of the book. Did you learn anything from writing Race, My Story, and Humanities Bottom Line? I did. I learned quite a bit about the history of other Americans of color that I just didn't know prior to researching the book. I didn't know, for example, that Hispanic Americans went through a period of lynching, just as African Americans did. I had no clue about that. I didn't know that hundreds of Hispanic Americans were lynched in the United States. I learned a lot about what are called the Indian Wars, the wars that took place between the Europeans that were coming into this continent and the native peoples, the indigenous people who were already here and had been here for 14 to 25,000 years. I learned a lot about the overall oppression of Native Americans as well. And I'm happy I learned that information. There's a lot more to learn, of course, but I would say that learning the history of groups that I didn't know before was my primary lesson in researching the book. Do you have anything specific that you want to say to your readers? There is. I'd like to say to my readers that I hope that after you've read the book, your thought is, I didn't know that. Why don't we learn these things in school? That is so helpful to me now that I understand that. I have a different perspective on this issue of race, this issue of racism. I think my mind has been opened. Perhaps my heart has been softened a little bit because I've been exposed to information that has led me to a totally different understanding of these issues that I just didn't have before. I'm a better person for having read this book. That's what I hope you leave your reading of the book with, that feeling, those thoughts. Why do you feel discussions about race and racism are important? Well, in my view, there is so much misinformation, lack of information about race and about racism that I really do believe in my heart of hearts that it's when we can sit down in deep dialogue with each other and deeply listen to each other from the heart, listen to our different experiences with race and with racism, listen to our family histories, that when we can really start sharing in that way, it's then that we have at least the possibility of maturing beyond racism. Now, of course, those discussions have to be combined with real-life experience in the world, real-life exposure to people whom we consider to be different from ourselves. But I think one of the most important first steps is to really sit and listen without judgment, without blame, to each other as we talk about how these issues of race and racism have impacted our lives. What does emotional emancipation mean to you? Well, as I think I referenced earlier, emotional emancipation specifically of people of African descent, because I can only talk really about what it means for me as one African American, is that it truly means that if we are liberated emotionally and psychologically, we understand our history. We understand our physicality. We understand that, for example, slavery is one small chapter in the entire history of our people. We're proud of our accomplishments that have contributed so much to the world and to American society as well. We are proud of our facial features, our hair, our skin colors, and we want to be nothing but what and who we are. When we get to that point, in my view, we will truly be emotionally emancipated and psychologically liberated. Do you recall how your interest in writing originated? I really don't, because it originated so long ago. I have always loved the written word, particularly letters, journals, and diaries. I love reading words that inspire the heart. And so my interest in writing really developed when I learned to read, and that was a very long time ago. So having the writer's spark has been with me for as long as I can remember, really. Who is your favorite Black author, and what is it that really strikes you about their work? By far, my favorite Black author is Dr. King. I have never seen a human being use words as eloquently and as beautifully and as compellingly as Dr. King does. When I was a child and he was alive at that time, giving his speeches and his presentations and his sermons, I was extremely inspired by just listening to his words. And then when I became an adult and started reading them, I was no less inspired. So one of my favorite books, of course, is A Testament of Hope, because it is a sort of a culmination of most of his major writings. So Dr. King is, and I believe will continue to be, my favorite Black writer. Absolutely. Do you have any advice for other writers who are considering writing about a similar topic? I actually do. I would encourage everyone who's reading or writing rather about the issues of race and racism to go both as deeply and as widely as you possibly can. Because, as I said, there is such a lack of information combined with misinformation about the issues of race and racism that anytime anyone writes on the subject, I think it would be of tremendous service to give as much detail, to be as compelling, to give as many facts as you can about whatever it is you feel called to share with us. Because we can all use as much information, as much education as we can. So try not to spare the details. Prove your case, make your point, and write as much as you like in the time and space as you have about the specific issue of interest to you. And finally, what are your current projects? Well, I'm currently writing a book called Religion, Different Paths, Same Journey, the fundamental truth about religion and spirituality. And I'm putting as much of my heart and soul into that book as I did into my book on race. I feel as compelled to write as much about that issue in a way that is as compelling as possible as I did about this issue, race. So I hope that you look at that book as well, enjoy it, and again, are moved to think differently and perhaps feel differently about the ways in which as a human species we can come together with regard to religion and spirituality. That's it for now. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about my book, Race, My Story, and Humanity's Bottom Line.